you don't have to worry about the forecast.
That's true.
Just
That
not
is true.
fair. It's just, what is the KP? One? Great, we're going
Eh,
out. You know?
yep. And boy, when a KP hits 2 or 3, you know you've got big time. It's
It is
usually
big.
pretty good up there.
We had almost a 5, and that was quite,
Oh,
I mean, that
wow.
was major storm time up there. It was a 4.5 was the most we got.
That's fantastic, though.
Yeah, it was impressive that night.
I cannot imagine.
Oh, you can imagine. You've seen all this 20
Well,
times.
okay, I've seen it in Alaska, but I've not seen it where you were at. How many days were you gone?
Uh, it was 2 weeks and 12 on the water.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, the
Yeah.
fall ought to be good.
Yeah, it'll be the first 2 weeks of October. It's not ideal moon-wise at all, but that's
Yeah,
they had open and
right.
they requested, so I just said, sure.
Don't blame you a bit.
Yeah, you can. I mean, it's just I've always that's always been my downfall and my strength maybe too, is that I say yes often.
And we're very glad you do.
Oh, thanks. Oh, I've got that illustration sort of coming up, a similar version.
Yeah, isn't
Oh,
that
there it is.
cool?
There it is. That's great. Who's putting that up? Is that you, Scott?
That's NASA. Yeah, I'm broadcasting it. It's NASA's visualization.
Wow.
Makes you glad to have a magnetic field, doesn't
Yeah.
Yeah,
it?
Yeah, we like them here on this
yeah.
planet.
Eric Rose is watching on YouTube, watching from Fries, Virginia. Shout out to the Echo Ridge Astronomical Society. And Bob Anderson, hello, folks. Bob Anderson here. So we got people logging in. We're very happy that you're joining us tonight on this. Terry, is it the 47th
Yep,
Astronomical League Live?
yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get this party started.
All right.
If we think about the magnetosphere as an orchestra, it actually works really well. You have a bunch of different instruments in this orchestra or this ensemble. You have our magnetic harp. You have a magnetic organ pipe. You have a magnetic drum. And they're all playing at the same time with various loudnesses and pitches. And they're also, just like if you ever go to an orchestra and you sit there before they start playing, they're all tuning their instruments at the same time.
Well, hello everyone. It's Scott Roberts from Explore Scientific and the Explore Alliance, and I am about to bring Terry Mann onto our program. She is our host for the 47th not Global Star Party, Astronomical League Live.
You're confused.
I guess so. I guess so. Hey, I got my logo over here. It's down over here
Yes,
somewhere, and
you did well.
yeah. So, anyways, very happy to be and honored to be broadcasting these Astronomical League live programs, and it's great to have all your wonderful guests on each time you do these. Terry, you keep upping the bar, so that's great, and you let people know what's going on with this massive organization called the Astronomical League, and so it's wonderful that you're sharing your time and all your knowledge with them. We were talking backstage I guess there's a backstage to this with your special guest Bob King, who's written many books on astronomy. But you both share a passion in Aurora, and so I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you for all the broadcasting you do, all the support for the league. I mean, so many of us have known each other for a long time, and we really tend to help each other out. We've got a really great astronomical community, and it's growing, it's getting bigger, but it's like we have extended family all over the place. I mean, we know so many people after being involved for so many years.
That's
And
right.
Bob King and Don Nab and David Levy and Chuck Allen and you are five of the best. And it's been a very
Thank you.
good honor to know you guys.
I know
and
they
thank
are,
you.
but I got a reputation.
Speaks for itself, right?
Yes, it does. We also have in our audience, we have Alan Dyer watching on, so from YouTube.
Great.
It
Hi,
says,
Alan.
cheers from sunny Alberta, Canada. I don't know how sunny it is, but
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. I wish it was sunny here. Yeah, I hope Alan's got clear skies, and all of you out there, I hope somebody's got clear skies. It's been kind of a nasty year so far.
Yes.
So welcome, everybody. As you can tell, we've all been talking, as Scott said, backstage, kind of enjoying. Really appreciate it, and we hope you always return. And my internet is blinking out every once in a while, so excuse me if I lock up. And welcome everybody. And what I would like to do is I would like to start off with David Levy and his poetry. We can't start a program without you. So how about
Thank
if I
you.
just turn it over to you?
Thank you so much, Terry. Excuse me. Okay, here we go. Tonight we're going to get a lecture from the king, and I'm really excited about that. The king of Sky and Telescope, Bob King, is going to be lecturing us tonight, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say, and Terry, what you have to say. I wanted to remind everybody that on the 13th, next Thursday night, there will be a total eclipse of the moon, and that's going to be a nice one. And it should be right sort of later in the night for the Eastern time zone, but where I hope to be at Palomar, it will be earlier, like around in the middle of the night or earlier even before that. Anyway, to celebrate the lunar eclipse, I'm going to quote from Thomas Hardy. And Thomas Hardy, I think many of you know, if you've taken any English courses in college at all, you will know that Thomas Hardy is one of the finest writers in the world, or was. His novels, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, Jude the Obscure, are absolutely incredible to read, and just the way he flows the English language. But Thomas Hardy also was a poet, a very fine one. And the poem I'm going to read for you tonight is based on an eclipse of the moon he saw from London in 1902, and he wrote it a year later in 1903. I love how the sonnet goes from the wonder of the Earth's shadow on the moon to the horror of what can happen here on Earth. And I know that for a lot of you, you're going to be connecting what happens then to what happens now. But here we go with Thomas Hardy at a lunar eclipse. Thy shadow, Earth, from pole to central sea, now steals along the moon's meek shine, in even monochrome and curving line of imperturbable serenity. How shall I link such sun-cast symmetry with the torn, troubled form I know as thine? That profile placid as a brow divine, with continence of moil and misery. And canst immense mortality but throw so small a shade, and heaven's high human scheme be hemmed within the coasts yon arc implies. is such the stellar gauge of earthly show. Nation at war with nation, brains that teem, heroes and women fairer than the skies. Terry, thanks to back to you.
Thank you, David. I appreciate so much you spending so much of your time with the League and with all of us. It's such a pleasure to know you. So thank you very much. And from here, let's go to Chuck Allen. And he really doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to try anyway. Two things. He is the president of the Astronomical League, and he is an amazing master observer. He could be the go-to on any telescope. He knows where he's at, what he's doing, and knows what it looks like. It is impressive when you see the master observers in the Astronomical League. So Chuck, thank you for joining us. I will turn this over to you.
Thank you very much, Terry. I remember, speaking of Thomas Hardy, had a novel called Far from the Madding Crowd, which I think is one of the things you think about when you observe, because that's about as far from the madding crowd as you can get. Tonight, I'd like to share a screen for just a moment, if I may. Is that possible here we go. Okay. I want to talk just very briefly about some things that are coming up in the Astronomical League that may be of interest to you. One of them is the NCRAL convention coming up in Minneapolis. This will be held on April 25th through 27th at Minnetonka, Minnesota, which is, I believe, a southwestern suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul, at the Marriott there. And if you've never attended an NCRAL convention, they're really fun events. They've been holding conventions for just about the length of time the league's been around. And Bob King was a wonderful speaker there last year, and hopefully we'll be there again this year. And also in June, this is about 2 weeks before the Bryce Canyon Convention, you'll have an opportunity to go to the Mid-States region 75th anniversary convention, which will be held at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. And they too are planning something extra special because it is their 75th year of existence as a region of the Astronomical League. And I attended their convention last year in Omaha, and it was a lot of fun. Just really tremendous group of people. And then, of course, we have our convention coming up at Bryce Canyon. This is from June 25th through 28th. We're talking about the opportunity to observe from Bortle 1 skies. You will be at a major and beautiful national park and near other great national parks in the United States. So it's a great vacation opportunity. And you'll be observing from a place called Rainbow Point at over 9,000 feet elevation in Bortle 1 skies. These are as dark as skies get in the continental United States, certainly, and just a fantastic opportunity to observe. We have a limited room block of 275 rooms, and they are going really fast. I'm not saying that to get you to register. They are, in fact, we're approaching capacity on this convention. So if you're planning on going, please make your decision soon before the room block fills. It'll be held at Ruby's Inn. Ruby's Inn is just a fantastic Western style hotel, Best Western hotel with fantastic pools and restaurants and gathering places, meeting rooms, and an old-fashioned Western town across the street that you can visit. It's right at the entrance to Bryce Canyon and very exciting. We'll, of course, have many vendors at these conventions. And Lowell Lyon, who's organizing our convention at Bryce Canyon, has done a fantastic job of getting vendors this time. Here's Bob speaking at the NCRAL convention, just an example of great speakers that we have at these meetings. And also, of course, you'll have an opportunity to meet exciting new people at our conventions. Here, a young friend of mine meeting Harrison Schmidt at the convention in Albuquerque a few years ago. We will have at all three of the conventions I just mentioned, that's the NCRAL convention in April, the MSRAL convention in June, and at Bryce Canyon, we will have astrophoto competitions with medals and plaques for winners. So please check the websites about the rules and the categories for each of those competitions. I want to say something about our awards. We have a deadline coming up of March 31st for submission for our many Astronomical League awards. For the youth awards, of course, we have the National Young Astronomer Award, which is now in its 33rd year. This is sponsored with the great generosity of Explore Scientific, and the telescope prize that goes to our winner is seen here. The year pictured here in Baton Rouge, we had 2 winners. They both got the telescope prize, so we had a fantastic opportunity to meet 2 winners at this convention. If you're a high school student doing research in astronomy, NIA is for you. We also have Horkheimer Youth Service Awards. These are for Astronomical League members of high school age who engage in public service, either through their clubs or just to the public in general. And these 2 awards provide almost $3,000 in prize money. We also have a Horkheimer Parker Youth Imaging Award and a Horkheimer or Mira Journalism Award. These have $1,000 top prizes. And again, the deadlines for all of these awards is coming up on March 31st. Just go to astroleague.org and look up awards at the very bottom of the page, and you can find all the information about applying for these. We also have general awards. Seen here, a very young looking Scott Roberts, who's been sponsoring the Leslie Peltier Award, as I think he liked to pronounce it, for observing. We have the Webmaster Award, of course. So if you have a club webmaster you want to recognize, please think about nominating that person. The Mabel Stearns Newsletter Award. If you have a newsletter editor you think is deserving, please send us a nomination. And also we have a sketching award with cash prizes as well. And finally, I'll close by mentioning the Williamina Fleming Imaging Awards, open to female league members age 19 and over. And we're not seeking a sponsor. I apologize to Scott. This is a sponsored award by Explore Scientific, and I'll replace this old slide with a new one shortly. I apologize for that. So that's it. I'll say no more other than to hope you will join us at some of these wonderful conventions that are coming up. Thanks, Terry.
Yep. Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, Bryce Canyon is coming along really nicely. I have a slide that I'll show if I remember all of the vendors. It is unbelievable the amount of vendors that are showing. So, and Chuck wasn't exaggerating. There's only like about 80 to 90 registrations left at this point. And I know for council, if anybody's listening, you no longer can get a room in that hotel on Monday night. All of the rooms at this point are totally sold out on Monday night. And our council meeting is on Tuesday. The conference does not start until Wednesday. So you can still get in Tuesday night. So a lot of great things going on with all the regional conventions. I'm really looking forward to the summer. We're just getting ready to start off. So, all right. Next, let's go to Don Knabb. Don is the chair of the Mideast region, Merrill, and he has been such a help to the league in so many places, but especially on our websites. Don has helped me with the Great Lakes region website, with our virtual Alcon that we did. Don was the one that showed me how to do everything, to try to put everything together, and helped me tremendously. So Don, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you back again.
Thanks, Terry. Let me share my screen here. I'll keep this fairly brief tonight because I know everyone's looking forward to hearing Bob King's talk. So
No pressure, Bob.
Should be coming through now. Okay, seeing this okay?
Yes.
Okay, so brief highlights of what's coming up the next couple of weeks in the night sky. And I like to always, let me just close this one menu here so I can see things better. Hide floating panel. There we go. Now I can see my screen better. I like to always mention every time I'm on that the Astronomical League provides night sky guides. John Goss puts a lot of effort in putting these together. So these are the 3 for this month. The first one is, of course, about the upcoming lunar eclipse, which is on March 14th, same night, of course, as the full moon. I think this is the maple sugar moon, when the trees start to flow maple syrup. The other one he put up was about Earthshine, which is the beautiful image you see of the dark side of the moon when it's at a thin crescent. It's the light shining off of the Earth, reflecting to the moon. And the third one is, of course, the standard night sky guide, which is more than just a map. John includes a walk through the brightest things in the sky to see and highlights binocular highlights. So I'm not going to walk us through that this time. We did that last time I was on, but these are great resources. And how do you find them? Here's the link, but let me show you briefly how to find them. Go to the League website, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and then you find Navigating the Night Sky. And this page has all these tools. And you can share these with anybody and everybody. Put them on your Facebook page. League club members can put them on in their newsletter, on their website, anywhere at all. Free to use totally. They are a valuable resource. So before I start the night sky, I do want to share this star trail time lapse. Bill McGeeney became the regional representative for Merrill this past summer when Alan Parody retired from that. He and his wife were camping, I think they consider that cabin, north of Toronto. And he sent me this image, and I just said, oh, I got to share this. This is such a beautiful image. This took him about 4 hours with his Canon 6D, and just an amazing, one of the best star trail images that I have ever seen. And then he also did a video, which we'll play here briefly. This is also, you can see the moon setting there in the lower part of the picture. And there's the Pleiades, and I believe that's Jupiter. There's Mars coming into the scene. And it wasn't long after he finishes, there's Mars up top, that his equipment got snowed in. Of course, it was in Canada, so it was winter time. So I just wanted to share that beautiful animation, beautiful time lapse that he put together. So what's going on in the sky? Lunar highlights tonight. Tonight after the show, you can go out, set your scope or binoculars up, and see Rupert Recta, the lunar straight wall. Last night, if we had been out, you would have seen the lunar X and the lunar V. But tonight, you're down just to the lunar straight wall. Of course, in the middle of the night for where I live, at 2:26 a.m., we have a total lunar eclipse. Not a great shot. It's the only one I could find in my records of previous lunar eclipse, but we'll have a color approximately like this. Hard to predict. Of course, this red blood color is caused by the refraction of light going around all the sunsets on the Earth, sunsets and sunrises. And here's a new one. I found this one on the Royal Astronomical the Canadian Royal Astronomical Association of Canada. This is called the Jeweled Handle. I had never seen this one before, and actually was lucky enough to find this image in my collection. So this is the Jeweled Handle. This is the peaks of the Jura Mountains, and you get it at just the right time. The peaks are illuminated, and yet the floor of the valley of the Bay of Rainbows, Sinus Iridium, is still black, and the part of the moon behind is still black. So it looks like if you were big enough, you could grab the moon by a handle. I'd never seen this one before, and it was mentioned on the calendar that the Royal Astronomical League of Canada puts out, and I found this to be an amazing thing. This would be Sunday night around 8 o'clock. You can see this. It's got to be when the sunrise on the moon is just right. But that is the Jeweled Handle, a new one to me. The planets, tomorrow night is when Mercury is furthest position from the sun. Very good viewing. And it'll be visible for the next, several days or a week and a half after that. But tomorrow night will be the best time when it's furthest from the sun to see it. Venus, I'm going to miss Venus. It's going to be dropping into the glow of the setting sun as the month progresses. And of course, that's because Venus is winning the race. See over here, Venus is winning the race around the sun and going to be passing from this part of the orbit to ahead of us in the orbit around the sun. And it'll be in the pre-dawn sky at month's end. Mars is still shining bright, high in the sky, nice red in between Castor and Pollux, making a triangle. For Jupiter, on the 11th That will be early next week. We have 2 moons you can see on Jupiter's face on March 11th. Saturn, sadly, we're going to miss Saturn. It's disappearing into the glow of the sun by mid-month. Same thing with Uranus. It's dipping low. You can probably catch it the first week or so of March, but then it's going to go into the west by month's end. And Neptune, we really can't see it all this month. It's too close to the sun or behind the sun. There is this partial solar eclipse on March 29th. For North America, especially if you live in northern Quebec, for me, where I live 20 miles west of Philadelphia, this is a simulation that I put together with stellarium. And you can see it's not much of a solar eclipse. I mean, this is about as partial as an eclipse gets. This will be on the 29th at just before 7 in the morning. The sun will just be rising and be very partially obscured by the moon. So not a great one for North America, this one, but still fun to see. So you get up in time. Now, deep sky, a couple things to show you in the deep sky. One of my favorite, I guess everyone has a favorite constellation. My favorite one is Leo. Why do I like Leo? Well, it's because Leo was the name of a dear departed friend in the atom world that we had. Leo left us a couple years ago, but I'll never forget him. And whenever I see Leo in the sky, it reminds me of Leo the cat. So one of the greatest things in the sky to see in galaxy season is the Leo triplet, and that is on Leo's back leg, and it's made up of 3 galaxies. These 2 are Messier objects, number 65 and 66, if I remember correctly. The Hamburger galaxy is an NGC number. I don't remember what that is. And the faintest of these is the Hamburger galaxy, but you can usually get these 3 if you have a good, very wide field of view telescope. You can get all 3 in one view. If you have good dark skies, you can see all 3 at once. It's a nice highlight on the night sky in March and April. And beyond that, there's more galaxies to see. Beneath Leo in the sky is the Macarian's chain. Now, this would be more for advanced observers. You probably need a little bigger telescope, but Macarian's chain is in the large group of galaxies in the Virgo group in Coma Berenices in the constellation of Virgo. And this is what the chain looks like. Probably can't get all of these in one field of view, but you can certainly scan and go from one side to the other, stopping in the middle in the eyes. So again, more for an advanced observer, but certainly visible with most telescopes in a dark sight. And then the last one I'll highlight is the Owl Nebula, and it's beneath the Dipper part of the Big Dipper. Now, if you go out and look, you're going to find the Dipper is actually, the handle is facing down right now. But I had to rearrange stellarium a bit just to get a better picture of it. So there is the Owl Nebula and Messier 97. If you put your telescope on it, it's probably looks sort of like this. This is from my Sea Star. You know, it's a dim object like many nebulas, but you can certainly see it. And if we had a very, very advanced telescope and taking a long exposure picture, this is what the Owl Nebula looks like. So, and while you're actually in this part of the sky, it would be another great place to look. Move your telescope over to the Cigar Galaxy and Bode's Galaxy, M81 and M82. So additional maps that are out there, you can easily download skymaps.com or just search for What's Out Tonight. And every month, these are free. So in addition to the Astronomical League guides, you can get these 2 guides every month, and it shows you the great things to see in the sky. This one actually has a whole second page to it of the events in the sky. What's Out Tonight is a 3-pager. So download and print them for free. And beyond that, I would just say get out and go look at the beautiful night sky. It's not quite as cold as it used to be. The nights are still long. So March is a great time to look at the sky. And I will stop sharing my screen. There we go. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Don. It's always great to hear what's up in the night sky because you bring up different things than what maybe I would think about doing because there's so much up there. So thank you so much for all of that information. It's really nice to have you here.
Thank you. It's the show that never ends.
That's true. I mean,
The
we
night
can do it
sky.
year after year and have different objects. There's
Yep.
so much up there to look
Yep.
at.
It's always
And
something
the sea. Go ahead.
There's always something to see up there. Always.
There is. And with the Sea Star, I think we have so many people, with the little smart telescopes that you can just go out and set it down and look. People that probably have never thought about doing astrophotography before are now trying it out, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yep.
it's
It's a lot of
exciting.
fun, and the Sea Star is very much fun at public outreach events. But
Yeah.
for me, nothing replaces seeing an object in the eyepiece. Nothing. Well,
I I
these
can
all these
understand that.
scopes, like the dwarf and the Sea Star and all these scopes, they're great, but there's nothing like looking at it with your own two eyes.
Yep. I have to agree. I'm looking forward to that myself if the sky's ever clear in Ohio.
All right,
All
thanks.
right. Thank you, Don.
Mhm.
I appreciate that. I am going to share my screen really quickly here and um, see if I can find there it is, what I'm looking for. And here's Bob tonight, and the title of his talk. Well, that's not the title of your talk, actually, so I'll let you do that. What I wanted to show was next. These are the rooms will be released on April 20th, is what I was originally told. And the weather should be really excellent there. But these are the different vendors that we have got coming that you can see. We've got quite a big list. So we're very happy to have all the vendors and we thank them too. And just to be able to be at Bryce Canyon in those Portal 1 skies is going to be amazing. These are all the presenters too, and you can find all of this on the Alcon website, as Chuck showed you there on the Astronomical League website. And let's see, and the last one again is what Chuck went over. Please consider all these awards because there are so many awards. As you saw, the youth awards, the adult awards. I mean, there are a lot of awards. The deadline is March 31st at 11:59 p.m. Please think about nominating somebody or nominate yourself. There's so many different things that you can apply for. So with that, what I'm going to do is stop sharing as soon as I can get that button to click back up there. There we go. I guess I already am. All right. Now we know Bob King. Is it Bob? Bob has been here just once or twice, I think. But I am going to tell you some more about Bob King. Besides the fact I'm really looking forward to your talk too. So Bob King fell in love with the night sky and astronomy when he was a kid growing up in Illinois and loves to share his passion with people of all ages. He writes for Sky and Telescope's website and magazine and maintains the Astro Bob astronomy blog. His books, Night Sky with the Naked Eye, The Wonders of the Night Sky, You Must See Before You Die, describe the joys of sky watching, while Urban Legends of Space examines science versus pseudoscience in astronomy. Bob wants to see everything he's read about in astronomy books, with the exceptions of falling into a black hole. Now, I can understand that one. But, Bob, you've also written a book on Aurora here lately.
Yes, that was published last fall by the American Astronomical Society, Sky and Telescope, basically. And it's called Magnificent Aurora. And it is about one of the things I love the most, which is the Northern Lights.
Yeah, I bet so. And I do have that book, and it is an amazing book. So, Bob, with that, I am going to go ahead and turn this over to you so we can hear your talk. And it sounds like you had such an exciting time.
I had a great time, Terry, and thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you, everyone else here with the Astronomical League, Chuck, Scott, and the crew. It's an honor to be able to speak once again before the group, so I really appreciate that. I thank you all. We'll start, as long as Terry, you kind of led in there a little bit with the Northern Lights, and so that's what we'll start with here. I'm going to switch over and share my screen. And almost there. Go. Slides. And are we at the beginning? Can you see a picture?
Yes.
Good. All right. This was taken on the deck of the ship. I took a trip to Norway basically with the Rhodes Scholar program. It's ROAD Scholar, and spent not quite 2 weeks on board a Hurtigruten ship called the MS Nordkapp. The Rhodes Scholar program, which is known as 50th year, I got connected with them through Alan Dyer in Canada. Alan and I are friends, and he made that connection for me. And I went on my very first trip. Alan's been on many, and I also want to thank him this evening because he's provided some of the images that we're going to be seeing that he's taken also with the Rhodes Scholar program. But basically, what's involved is a 2 week trip up the coast of Norway, and I was one of the presenters. So there's a group leader. We had a group of about 25 people on the ship, which carries around 350 folks. And I was the person who gave the talks. So I gave 5 lectures, mostly about the Northern Lights, but on other topics as well. And then there was a group leader that kind of got people to places at the right time and with the right transportation. It's a wonderful program, and it's dedicated. People who take the Rhodes Scholar trip to Norway are basically doing it because they want to see the Northern Lights. And Norway is one of those for sure places where you're going to see the Northern Lights because the permanent auroral oval happens to sit right over northern Norway. But even before I got to Norway, I can't sleep on airplanes. And so we're flying over just the wilds of Labrador and northern Quebec and just south of Greenland. I'm looking out the window thinking, we're at the right latitude for the Northern Lights. And before too long, a little bit of aurora started to form. So I got my camera ready and pressed it against the window and got the pillow in there and blocked all the reflections. But it really turned into kind of a nice Northern Lights display. And you can see there the wingtip of the airplane, some rays forming. There's even a little bit of color down here. You can see some purple glow from excited nitrogen atoms or molecules, pardon me, and then some green glow, which is caused by oxygen. Our first point of landing in Norway was Bergen, which is on the west coast of the country towards the southern end of Norway. It's sort of shaped like a giant chicken leg pointed down. So Bergen is down here at the fat part of the chicken leg. And our hotel was right over here on the end of this very historic district called Briggen. And this is the Harbor District. These businesses, these homes have been there since about 1702. That's when they were built. But people had built other homes prior to that. But it all burned down in 1702 and was rebuilt. So we were there for about a day. And here's another famous monument that's also visible. Not quite as old, at least the business isn't as old as some that we found in Bergen, but this is the McDonald's, which is not too far from Briggen. And it's in the loveliest building I've ever seen a McDonald's housed in. This is a photograph of the Nordkapp. We had an opportunity to see it pass under the bridge. We took a separate ferry at one point during the trip, so I was able to get a photograph of it. And I can show you on this picture the places where we viewed the Northern Lights. Right here on the front of deck 5, which faces into the wind, very important thing I'll talk more about later as you head north. And then right up top here around the back, which is wide open, that's the top of the ship, that's called deck 7. This is our route, roughly 1,200 miles up the coast of Norway. Here we are starting in Bergen, which is right there on the west coast at about latitude 60 degrees north, which already puts you pretty far north. Here where I live in Duluth, we're at 47 degrees north. We call ourselves the Northland. It feels like the north, but when you get to Europe, suddenly north is different. You're much further north in general, especially if you're in Scandinavia. We started there and then traveled up the coast, stopping at various places along the way because the ship, the Nordkapp, is not just a tourist or a cruise ship, but it's also used as sort of a ferry for the local people so that they can go from port to port to port. They travel up and down the coast. So there's room for cars on board. And so you can drive your car in, head up somewhere else, pick up the ship again and head back south. We went all the way up here. Furthest north was near Hammerfest, which was latitude 71 degrees north. And then the farthest east we went was around the top of the country, right to the border of the Russian Federation at a town called Kirkenes. Well, as you head north, well, you're well aware, if you've ever traveled south, you know how your stars change. And of course, I knew the stars would change when I went north, but I still wasn't prepared for how dramatic it was. For instance, this is the view looking south this time of year. This is back in mid-February when I first took off. And then how it looks when you're up in Tromsø, Norway, at almost latitude 70 degrees. Orion just moved horizontally across the sky, basically. And when we were farthest north, Sirius was only about 2 degrees above the horizon. So it was very weird seeing Sirius basically gone because it was often hidden by distant mountains. And the same is true with the Dipper. When you look north from our latitudes, you see the Dipper over here in Cassiopeia this time of year. It's standing on its handle. But up there, it took me a little while to get used to seeing the Dipper way high up, not unexpected, but Cygnus and Vega, along with the constellation Lyra, they are all circumpolar. So I would see them in the evening in the northwest, and they never left the sky. So it took some time getting used to seeing those two constellations as circumpolar groups. And that's what happens when you're up at those high latitudes. Many stops. Like I said, there were roughly 33, 34 ports that we stopped along the way, all different times of day and night, mostly brief stops. At the longer ones, we'd get off the ship and we'd go on various land tours. This is just a scene that I captured as we were departing this one small town. You can see the beautiful snow-covered fjords, the mountains. Over here, you see these little fences. Those are avalanche fences to prevent the snow from falling down over homes and railroads and whatever is there. And there's a little bit of illumination from twilight in this picture, as well as lights from the city. I was a bit surprised up the coast of Norway. If you look at a map, it looks rugged and Arctic, but there are quite a few lights, small and larger towns along the coast. And so city glows are fairly common along the way. And sometimes you have to wait for the ship to move before you can get a good picture of the northern lights. Otherwise, you get too much city glow, rather like being at home. Our group was 25 people. They were just a great bunch. We met together all the time for meals, had a lot to talk about. We shared the Northern Lights experience and lots of other things. There's some great folks that I sat and ate dinner with. And I have to show you at least a couple of the meals because, my gosh, they were so delicious. This was my favorite dessert. That's ice cream there in the center. Very creamy, very delicious. And that's a rice pancake in the middle. The salmon was just to melt in your mouth. Absolutely delicious. And this is a slice of a reindeer steak. And one of the things that they really tried to do is use local foods aboard the ship. So reindeer is a very common animal found up there, almost like deer in our region. And so reindeer was often on the menu. I felt a little guilty, about, facing Santa Claus should that ever happen. But I have to say I did enjoy the reindeer. And there's lingonberries, there's cloudberries, there's all these things that you find in the north, and they were used for the preparation of the food. As far as seeing the aurora, what was great was that the crew would alert you to the northern lights, but not always. If I remember 2 nights, I was just sitting down to dinner, or just right in the middle of dinner, and it's like, the crew would like to alert you that the Northern Lights is out right now. I'm like, oh. So, of course, one night I left a beautiful dinner just sitting there on the table so we could go out and see the lights. However, they didn't always alert you, especially if it wasn't a bright display. And so our group formed a WhatsApp group called Under the Stars. And so we would alert one another. I usually would post an aurora forecast and then alert people when there was northern lights. So I would go up after dinner on one of those decks, deck 5 or 7, look up northern lights, and be sure I messaged everybody. And then before long, people would start trickling up to the decks and looking at the northern lights. Of course, that was our pants on moment. People enjoyed the pants on. Any aurora watcher is familiar with this expression. When you hear pants on, it means, hey, get up there, get out there, time to look at the northern lights. This is a photograph from Alan, and you can see what it looks like under that sky. The Big Dipper is visible there off to the middle left. And sometimes the lights were left on, as you see down here. Normally this was off. And people would go out, take their cell phones, primarily cell phone photography. Had a digital camera. Those cell phones were this one fellow decided to, for extra stability, to just get on his back. And also because when the Aurora really got cooking up there, it was an all sky affair. And so you could just lie down and your best pictures were what was happening almost exactly overhead. You can see a little bit of green Aurora there in the upper right. During the 12 days that we were on the water, our group saw some form of northern lights, whether it was a poor display, mostly hidden by clouds, or a really great one. We saw it on 9 nights. So it was a very rich and very rewarding experience being there. In case you have not photographed the Aurora with one of your phones, whether it's an iPhone or a Samsung, very easy to do. The phone is actually better in some ways than the digital camera because when you take a time exposure, and it typically will default to 3 seconds, it stacks multiple very short exposure images, one on top of the other, and eliminates the vibration. It also preserves detail in the landscape. The ship is always moving. So if you take a time exposure of 3 seconds, your landscape is going to be a little bit blurred. So you just aim the phone at the Aurora, you hold steady, crosses appear, keep those crosses center, 3-second exposure, you're good to go. And so most people, like I say, did use cell phones. The best phone, hands down, that people were talking about, including the Galaxy phone users, was the iPhone 16. And Kristen, who was one of in our group, she used an iPhone 16 and she shot this very lovely photo of a beautiful Northern Lights display, including some of the foreground too. As far as cameras like the one that I brought, I used a Canon R6 mirrorless camera. Wonderful, great. You get a bright image in your viewfinder, helps you to compose your picture at night. And so I ended up taking just tons of very short exposures. Again, the ship is pitching around. There's also winds. Sometimes I was able to time it so that when the ship was at the bottom of a wave before it was ready to head back up, I hit the camera exposure and then caught that relatively quiet, steady interval, and then on the other side too. I found that you have to have at least an f2.8 lens, a fast lens when you're there, and have no fear whatsoever of using high ISOs, rack up that sensitivity. I think my minimum was maybe 1600, but I typically shot around 3200. One night it was insane outside, so I had to go up to 20,000 with exposures of 2 seconds. If you have an f2 lens, which opens another stop wider, all the better. Now, early on, we were at the lower, quote, lower latitudes, 60 to 63, 64 degrees. And from these lower latitudes, the northern lights resembles what you would see in the northern part of the US. So you get kind of a ray type display with arcs, a familiar kind of what I call a horizontal display of the northern lights. But as we move further north, once we got to around 65 and then north of there, the ship was actually under, what I'm going to show you a few slides from now, it was under something called the auroral oval, which is a permanent auroral fixture that's up there in the atmosphere starting at around 65 miles altitude and going up to a couple of 100 miles high. And that aurora, because you're right underneath it, you see it from a different perspective. We call it the polar aurora, and it looks different from what I would see here in the Midwest typically. Of course, heading north, there were certain important places that were all anticipated crossing. One of them was the Arctic Circle at latitude 66.5 degrees north. And from here, at certain times of the year, you get to see the midnight sun. Not in February, though, of course. And when we crossed the circle, they actually had on a tiny island, there was a globe, a marker. You can see it in this photograph, the island of Vikingen. And that was Hooray, we all made it up to the Arctic Circle. But there was more. There was also a ritual that was performed on board called the Arctic Circle ceremony that you could participate in, and I did, and a bunch of other people did too. And what they did was they pull your jacket back and take a ladle of water, ice cold water with ice, and dump it right down your spine. Oh my God, it was so cold. I couldn't believe it. I went back to my cabin, I took off my jacket, and just all this snow fell down on the floor. It was crazy, but it was a wonderful initiation into the Arctic. Whereas our heart's desire was to see the northern lights, and you probably already know that the aurora essentially all comes from the sun. It's due to things that happen on the sun, our nearest star. Its sun is 93 million miles away. It's really hot. It's so hot that the gases on the surface of the sun boil off into space. And they're not even neutral gases. They're not made of neutral atoms. It's so hot there that those atoms of hydrogen are broken apart into subatomic particles. Are broken apart into protons and electrons. And this forms not only the corona around the sun that we see during a total solar eclipse, the beautiful pearly glow around the blackened moon, but it also forms the solar wind, this continuous stream of particles. And since it's charged particles, it's actually called plasma. It's not normal matter, but it's called plasma. It conducts electricity, creates magnetic fields. It's a little bit different from the matter like what your computer is made out of. Anyway, this material forms the sun's corona and creates the sun's magnetic field, which you can see here is these beautiful broad petals. And then these tight little loops are over sunspot groups. And here is where the magnetic energy of the sun is more greatly concentrated. So you see the corona, the streaming solar wind, and then these tight little loops over sunspot regions. And it all resembles just a bar magnet. I mean, if you've ever played with a bar magnet and iron filings, the resemblance of that to what we see at the sun with its magnetic field is very much one-to-one. Now, the Earth also has a magnetic field. Thank goodness, because it creates this protective bubble of magnetism around our planet called the magnetosphere. Here again, we have the magnet with iron filings. The Earth behaves as if there was a giant bar magnet in its core, and you see the same whirls of magnetic field around it. I suppose if you went out in space with enough iron filings, you could see the Earth's magnetic field with your own eyes. Notice something interesting about our magnetic field. The magnetic North Pole is actually down in Antarctica. Our field comes out of the magnetic north, which is in Antarctica, and it points upward, curls around south, to the south, and re-enters in the polar regions here. And a way to remember this is that your compass needle points to the magnetic South Pole. So north on your needle is pointing to south. This is a representation of Earth's magnetic field in space, and you can again see how similar it is to the field around something just as basic as a bar magnet. Here is our Earth. We're going to take a look at how the solar wind pushes against it. It is some crazy weather happening out there. We complain about the wind here on the ground. Well, this little bit of a video is going to give you a feel for how Earth's magnetic field is buffeted by the solar wind. So we'll start the animation, and you'll see it's almost like a windsock. You can see the solar wind pushing against and flexing that field and stretching it. And it's imparting energy into the magnetic field of the Earth. There's the magnetic field lines, as you saw previously. What's interesting about this is that even if there are no solar storms, that continuous stream and fluctuating speed and energy in the solar wind can squeeze and stretch Earth's magnetic field in ways that can give us the Aurora Borealis, even without a solar storm. But if you want a big one, the ones that you're like pants on, you got to get out there. Those have several different sources. One of the main ones are flares. And these are places on the sun, usually near or within sunspot regions, where north and south magnetic fields reconnect explosively and produce this blast that ejects part of the sun's atmosphere out into space. Again, that's charged particles, right? Electrons and protons. And if we're lucky, it will blast in Earth's direction. A typical flare is, you can see it in a telescope as a brightening. You can actually watch it live, brighter and fainter. But when you see a flare like that through a telescope, you're actually witnessing something that's so powerful, it's equal to, as I've got there, 100 megaton hydrogen bomb, millions of hydrogen bombs, just a spectacular amount. And it's a good thing the sun is as far away as it is. Another source of materials streaming from the sun that can hit us at high speed, similar to one of these coronal mass ejections that occasionally happen with flares, are coronal holes. These are open areas in the sun's corona where the magnetic the field is wide open and particles just stream straight out into space from the sun. And if you have one of these holes positioned, aimed at the Earth, then that high-speed stream of material can also squeeze and cause reconnection, as we'll see in just a moment, cause Aurora Borealis here down on the Earth and all kinds of interesting geomagnetic storm activities. So there's the sun on the left. We have a coronal mass ejection blast. Typical speed of the solar wind is about 1 million miles an hour. But during a blast like this, it can go up to 7 million. That is a lot of power. We have our defense up and ready. We've got elbows out, so to speak. And that elbows out is our magnetic field, which is shaped by the sun and it interacts with the sun. We call it the magnetosphere. And you can see it there lined up in blue. Now, when the sun sends a blast towards us, it also bundles it with the sun's magnetic field. It's not a neutral thing. There's north and south within that blast. It is sort of a magnetized cloud of charged particles. When the magnetic field in that cloud happens to be pointing south, as you see here, it connects and couples with Earth's north pointing field, just the way north and south poles of a magnet snap together. And when those two things snap together, the field line and that material gets blown back. It connects here. We'll see it connect there, and it gets blown by the solar wind behind the planet until it pinches together. North and south meet again, and it just blasts the material back towards the Earth, towards the night side of the Earth, into the upper atmosphere, excites the atoms, and that's what causes the northern lights. You're going to take a little closer look in this illustration, which shows you the full process. The material on the left, there's Earth's magnetic field. We're connecting now. Now we're pinching on the right, on the night side. And then the fun begins. And that material that you see, that energy is streaming into the polar regions. And that's why we see the aurora in the polar regions, not directly at the North Poles, not the geographic poles, but around these oval areas. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Here's the Earth. There's the electrons. In this diagram, it just shows the electrons, but there's also protons streaming in. But the electrons are primarily responsible for the northern lights that we can see visually, right? There's proton aurora too. So these things are streaming in, and they are striking the atmosphere at this incredible speed of 44 million miles an hour, give or take. And that is enough energy to excite the atoms there to glow. Here's the southern oval. There are two ovals. There's one on the top, the northern, and this one down on the bottom over Antarctica. This is the southern oval. And you can see it there kind of flashing, flickering away as that material from the sun gets funneled down into the polar regions. If you're ever looking for an analogy, how do I explain the aurora to someone that doesn't know anything about the aurora? Well, as long as they know what an old computer monitor looks like, you can just tell them it's kind of like that. You've got a source here, which is an electron beam, and that beam is passing through a vacuum, and it's striking a screen that's coated with a certain kind of a fluorescent material. And when the electrons hit the screen, it makes the screen glow. And that's what's happening really in a sense with our atmosphere. We have these electrons striking the atmosphere and then making the air glow. And the air glows in these great colors, way high up in the atmosphere, and then a little further down, when the electrons strike oxygen atoms, they give off red light. They get excited, their energy increases, and then to get rid of that energy, they return to their rest states and emit red light. Further down, around 100 to 70 miles high, electrons hit oxygen atoms again, and they give off green light. So the primary colors of the northern lights most of us see are green and red. Red is more difficult because our eyes are less sensitive to it, whereas green is much easier to see because our eyes are most sensitive to green light. Further down yet, we have nitrogen right down here. Really energetic electrons can go all the way down to near the maybe 60 miles high, that low, and strike nitrogen molecules, and they will glow purple. And so sometimes you'll see this beautiful plum-colored edge to the northern lights. That's from nitrogen. Here's a kind of a view of the northern oval. You can see, where should I go? Where are good places to see the northern lights? I want to be underneath that beautiful green bagel. Well, these are the places to head. You can go to Fairbanks. Alaska is right up there by the oval. Churchill, Manitoba, great place for viewing the northern lights. Reykjavik and Tromsø. So any of the cities, any area that is located close to or underneath that ring, that donut, will see northern lights most nights of the year when it's clear. Okay, not in the summertime, right? Because you're so far north, you're getting twilight and midnight sun effects. But otherwise, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to see it. Here we are looking down over the poles. In quiet times, when there are no solar storms, the ovals are still present, but they contract down to kind of a small circle. You can see here the northern oval. Notice that it still goes through northern Norway, and it passes near Fairbanks and those other areas that we talked about. So even when there's no storm, the oval is constantly alive. There's always material being fed there into the upper atmosphere, however little, to create that glowing ring. And the same is true on the right in the southern hemisphere. This is a satellite view of just a small section of the oval. And you can see this is over Hudson Bay, Canada, in the northern provinces. Just look at that aurora. Wow. That's why you go north into Alaska and Norway, so that you can put yourself underneath there, and it just rages all night long. During a solar storm, okay, when we do get that CME, when we got a big coronal hole blowing our way, the ovals expand. They expand equatorward. So in the northern hemisphere, that means it's expanding to the south. And as it expands, the oval's edge nudges close to or into the United States. And that's why we can see at mid-latitudes the northern lights when we have some good solar storming happening, because the oval is energized now. There's a lot more material going into it, and it becomes more expansive. One way we measure the magnitude of these storms impacting our upper atmosphere and our magnetic field is by using a measure called the KP index. K means, it's a German word. It just means a specific numbering, and P is planetary. So it's KP index, and it measures the magnitude of the storms. It can range from nothing all the way up to 9. We had an extreme storm back in May of 2024 that just lit up the sky. And I believe it was another KP9 that we had in October of last year. So here, during a KP3, the lower number, it's kind of a quiet. You don't get much aurora, but as it ramps up, the storm ramps up, that number increases. a typical storm here in my neck of the woods in the Duluth area would be a KP5, which is also called a minor storm. And in a KP5, the oval expands southward just enough so that it paints the aurora in the northern half of the sky for my region. So I'll look up and I'll see these arcs and I'll see these curtains. Here's an example. This is a space shot, once again, where you can see the edge of the auroral oval. Here's Duluth, and it's not over Duluth, but it's off in the distance. So I'm looking at it horizontally, kind of from the side. And when you do that from this perspective in the Midwest and you look at the aurora, it's kind of a broadside view of the edge of the oval. And so we often see rays and arcs, but not so often where you get these giant forms at the top of the sky. Here's another example. Beautiful. We get beautiful colors too. Look at the oxygen there. Look at the green showing up and the red also. The blue, by the way, is from nitrogen. We had the same thing in Norway. We had low aurora in the northern sky early on in the trip that resembled what you might see in the Midwest. There's another example. That is one long, beautiful arc. And another example. This is on the last night of our trip. More familiar type forms, but I really wanted to see the polar aurora, and I was not disappointed because we had several nights when we were up there beneath the oval. Here's a picture of the oval over Norway. This was on the night of the 20th of February, and you can see it cutting all the way across Finland, upper Sweden, and so on. There it is. So that's where you got to go. So here's the ship. Once we got under the oval, that's the Nordkap, the ship, the aurora's appearance definitely changed from what I was used to. The first great night was this giant dead man's hand in the sky. I mean, I just looked up and I saw these big, like somebody took paints and just smeared, like a kid just smeared this pale green paints across the sky in the form of a giant hand. I mean, to get these pictures, I can't even convey the size of this because this was taken with a lens, a type of fisheye that has a field of view of 180 degrees. So basically from eastern to western horizon, this was massive. And then there were these incredible corkscrews, these whirls that would begin at the horizon, and then they would untwirl across the sky into this grand shield shapes or amoeba-like shapes, and then come back down on the other end of the sky. At one point, I've seen all these birds. I'm like, what does that look like? And it reminded me of, if you've ever heard of MC Escher, he was a graphic artist and he had the interlocking figures. And I thought, MC Escher should be here to see this. He would love it. I've seen edging on an aurora before, but I've never seen so many multiple ripples like this in the Northern Lights. So it was just a unique sight. Here you can see the land. Notice the land here. The mountains are blurred because we are moving. All right. There's special things you have to take care of on a ship. You know, like I say, high ISO, wide lenses. And then, I mean, you know, you lean back, your neck. But of course, some of the people were complaining about sore necks, but they weren't really complaining. But there's just these vast sky-filling greenish diffuse glows, and they would develop ripples along the edge, and then you would just wait and think something's going to blow, and occasionally it would just blow. It would turn into this brilliant display, and then 10 minutes later, this is what surprised me. It would be incredibly bright and active, disappear practically after 10 minutes, and I thought, wow, is this going to be the end? And then it would come right back. You'd see a little curl in the east, and then before long, it would unravel and it would start all over again. It was this rapidity from big display to big display to big display that I hadn't seen so often here in my little neck of the woods. Here's another view. Again, I'm using a lens that covers so much of the sky just to give you a view as you'd see it on the ship, because it did cover so much of the sky. Look at that ribbon. Good Lord. Everybody was just kind of shouting. And there's Orion there, and there's his belt. And down here you can see some of the light pollution that I mentioned. Sometimes it added to the photograph, sometimes not. And then many curtains all across the sky. Just you're underneath these moving curtains. Gorgeous, gorgeous. This was a really brilliant display of the Northern Lights. I think the exposure here couldn't have been more than 1 second. And you can see quite the intense green and also that purple color that you get from nitrogen down there at the bottom. Really, it's like lightning almost. It was very brilliant, but very brief. Here's another one of my favorite forms, the giant amoeba-like shapes that you see, these multiple swirls. This is a form I don't see where I live, so it was great being underneath the oval, just to have that, well, not the bird's eye view, but I guess the worm's eye view of the Northern Lights. And then this is a snowstorm. We would be out, and we'd suddenly just hit a snow squall. And that would be it. The game would be over. Show is over. But we learned that these things only lasted 10 or 15 minutes. So we go in and have something to drink and sit and talk. And then somebody popped their head out and go like, clear again, the Aurora's out. So I figured I'd better take a picture of what it looked like, that snow driving through. Just a scene, more Aurora. There were quite a few nights when it was partly cloudy. And so you had to shoot through the clouds, and sometimes to good effect. I often tell people never stop photographing. If you see clouds, stick with it. You can get some very dramatic imagery when that happens. Later on in the trip, we had this very icicle-like Northern Lights display up at the front of the ship. It's really gorgeous. Down here, you can see Jupiter, and there's the Pleiades. And this is a coronal display where the rays all peaked near the top of the sky. The Big Dipper was up there. Here's the handle. And here is the bucket. And this was, I don't know what to say anymore. I'm running out of adjectives. Somebody help me. This is really a bright display. And in this case, it was nice having the lights along the bottom from the bridge, because it sort of parallels the lights a little bit. And so you have these opportunities when you're on this moving vessel to compose images that include the landscape, which is ever changing. Finally, when we got back down south towards the end, I'm sorry, I put the final night, the 14th, I meant the 24th, pardon that. Notice that the Northern Lights looks a little more familiar with the bright parallel rays. That particular end of the aurora slowly developed into this very beautiful crown. Oh my gosh, it was like, you just watch this happen. I think this night I took the fewest number of photographs. I just sort of leaned on the edge of the ship. It wasn't too windy, and I just soaked it all up, and it just felt great. I've got some extra electrons that I brought back. So when you're in the oval area, you just don't need a very active oval. It can look like nothing on a map. And by the way, all of these oval images are courtesy of NOAA, the Space Weather Forecasting Center in Colorado, and they're available to anybody, anytime. So you don't need an active oval, which means you don't need a high KP index to see the Northern Lights. Matter of fact, it got to the point of, I basically told people, well, they would say, do you think we'll see the Northern Lights tonight? And I go, absolutely, we'll see the Northern Lights. So what's the KP? I said, well, it doesn't really matter what the KP index is. If it's 1, that's fine. If it's 3, it's going to be really good. So I had to adjust my expectations from hoping to see it when it hit 5, 6, and 7 to knowing I'd see it when it was 1, 2, and 3. Funny thing about the oval is if you get a really big storm, in other words, you get a high KP number, the oval can expand so far to the south that you won't even see the Northern Lights from where the oval normally is at. You might see it way down in the southern sky. So a low number is great when you're up under the oval. Oh, sorry. Oh, hold on. I'm looking for my little stopper there. I just wanted to share a few of the sites and places that to me were wonderful. I had a great time at. This is Eileen Christina Oskal. She was in the town of Buda. That's how you pronounce it. And it's spelled B-O-D-O, but Buda, way up the coast of Norway. And one of our excursions, we went to visit her. She is a Sami person. So she is a reindeer herder, basically. She's in a reindeer herding family. The Sami were kind of the Aboriginal people before the Europeans were even there. The Sami were up there. All their lives are built around herding reindeer, and it's just built around reindeer. And that's Angel, the reindeer, and of course everybody loved Pet Angel. She was very sweet. But I learned something really fascinating from Eileen, and it was a new word, and it's called a yoik. Maybe some of you have heard of a yoik. She shared her yoik with us, and what it was a spoken word type of a song that is about you, identifies you and your family origins. So you would speak your yoik to someone, and they would be, I understand something about your personality and your background and where you're from. So she's saying us her yoik. And I thought, I've got to get a yoik. I've got to come up with some way to describe myself in this spoken word song. It was a very beautiful thing to hear. And I don't have a recording of her yoik, but I do have one that I picked up from an old recording from the 1950s. I'll play just a little bit of it for you. Well, she's saying us her yoik, and she's saying us her sister's yoik, and I could tell the difference in personality right away. It was really fun. Another place we stopped at was the northernmost point of Norway. It's called North Cape. They've got a globe monument there. I think the Norwegians really like these globes. You know, they're right at the top of the globe. That was at 71.2 degrees north. It has been a tourist location for at least a couple of centuries. Before there was a road there, people would actually go up the 1,000-foot walk or 1,000-foot elevation change to the top of this. So there's a great museum as well when you're up there, and a wonderful place to visit. And being the furthest north point, one of the things that I thoroughly enjoyed, especially here, was the fact that at noon, the sun was only about 9 degrees high. So you have this very low sun, and you're pastel light, very soft. There's clouds moving about, and I call it the polar light. It was one of the most beautiful lights I've ever seen. This low sun all day, and then early sunsets, obviously. So there were gorgeous pastels, and this was taken there at that location. I also enjoyed the kick sleds. I saw a few people on these, and I thought, you know what? We could use these in Duluth. I could see a good use. You could just go shopping, put your stuff in a basket, and then kick your way up the street like that. Very convenient, because there's always, I noticed that you always leave a certain amount of snow on the street. It was never scraped down to the asphalt. I don't know why. Maybe it snows there all the time. Not too deep, but there's always snow about. This is a view taken from a hilltop near the northernmost point in a town called Hammerfest. You have this Antarctic landscape, and you think, oh my God, it looks so forbidding. But the whole area is warmed by the Gulf Stream. So your average temperature in February, the average high was like 32, 34 degrees, and at night it might go down to 25 if. So it's mild and it's snowy. It's just plain gorgeous. We did other things. We were able to enter this little church, and they gave a wonderful concert, these three musicians. This is in Tromsø. In Tromsø, I also cross-country skied. I love skiing, and I had that opportunity. So the instructor said, go as far as you want, do what you want. So I did. Also, you can buy souvenirs. People were buying Norwegian sweaters, but wouldn't you know, I came across the Aurora soap, and I am somewhat skeptical that it was actually made under the Northern Lights. I mean, perhaps I mean, it does happen all the time, but they'd have to work late, I think, to do that. So you can see kind of the colors of the soap, which is blue and green, and it's swirly too. And I have one final slide, and then if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer. But one final slide. During the brightest aurora, I thought, I've never done this before. I pulled out my cell phone. I said, I think something's going to happen. So I took my phone. The phones aren't great for live shots of the northern lights, but this thing actually did start to sparkle. So if you're in a room, it's not real bright, but you could dim the lights down, it'll look that much better. But I want you to listen to the reaction of the crowd as this aurora unfolds. And I'm just taking my phone and panning along this arc. So here we go. Whoa. Look at the pink. Oh! Oh! Oh God, look at that. So, it was, I mean, you know how it is when you have expectations for the Northern Lights, but it can just overwhelm you. And that particular night, I think, well, you heard the reaction of the people just overwhelmed us, which, like a total solar eclipse in a way, the emotional wave that went through the crowd kind of brought us all together as one spirit as well. And I love when that happens with a group of people I don't even know. So that was one of the wonderful things that happened on a trip of many wonders. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Bob. That was really interesting. Uh, so many, it's amazing to me because the pictures, I don't care what we do, the pictures cannot catch that feeling. Just like what you videoed there at the end, the energy that happens when that goes coronal and it moves so fast.
Yeah.
It just, oh, it's amazing. And
Yeah.
you know, with it being solar max, this is a time to really consider the next 2-3 years. Head north, head as far north as you can sometime if you have not seen it. A lot of us have seen it, here locally in our backyards, and we were lucky to see that. But as Bob said, when the farther north you can get, the more spectacular it can be.
And the thing about going north, like to Fairbanks, Norway, Northwest Territories, wherever, is that you have a guarantee of the Northern Lights. I know that I'll see them in Duluth now and again, but when people ask, I say, well, I can't really predict. So I say, get under the oval. It's like your
Right.
blankie, your Northern Lights blanket. You get underneath that oval, and
Yeah,
chances are good you're going to see some aurora.
definitely. Anybody got any questions?
Just you had a nice audience watching, and some people, I think, tuning in a little late here, but you'll be able to watch this, of course, in rerun if you're catching just the tail end of this. And it's always a pleasure to have Bob King and Terry Mann here with all the rest of the team from the Astronomical League as well. David Levy, President Chuck Allen, and Don Nab. All of these people are often on Global Star Party as well, and so it's just it's great. And no, I don't see questions, but I have a question for you, Bob and
Yeah.
Terry. How has how do you think that the sense of awe and just that the spectacular confrontation of this force of nature, how do you think that affects you and people in general?
Well, it's sort of release of emotion for a lot of us. I think it taps into some of the stuff we hold inside, and when you see it, you just start
Yeah,
leaking you just
that's a good.
you want to cry, and that release of emotion, especially if it's happening with everyone around you, the
Mhm.
force of it is powerful and transforming. So yeah, and you don't know when that's going to happen necessarily. And sometimes you think, oh, you'd rather be alone watching the Northern Lights. Boy, was I glad I wasn't alone that night, because the people just amplified the experience.
Mhm.
It's shared experience is what it comes down to for me. And the more of that, the better, I think, for all of us. Terry,
I agree.
what do you
Yeah.
think?
I think your brain hits overload because you know it's Aurora, you know there's going to be light dancing in the sky. But when you actually see this, it is like your jaw will drop because you can't really imagine it until you see it like that. And then, I stood there, and if I would not have heard somebody yelled, it's gonna go coronal the first time, I did not have time to move my camera. All I did was look up, and I didn't move until it was done. And it really it catches you off guard.
Yeah.
It is beautiful. It is fast when it's overhead. It can be fast, but it's hard to even explain it because your brain just doesn't quite grasp what's going on until you see it a few times, and then you begin to predict a little bit when you can.
When you can, yeah, but the Aurora, that's why I always keep looking at the Northern Lights and go out for just about any display, because I always figure there's something new going to be in whatever
Yeah.
it is that I've never seen before. And then sometimes you get a real treat, like when that happens. But of course, the most important thing, we all know the cardinal thing is be present, put yourself in a place where this can happen if this is an experience that you want. And don't worry about them if you can. I know it can be hard, but set aside money if this is an experience you'd like to have, and just sort of stockpile it over time and go ahead and make that trip. I don't think you'll be disappointed. People make eclipse trips all the time, total solar eclipse. This is the equivalent to me of a total solar eclipse. That
Yeah.
kind of an aurora experience. They're identical, in terms of their emotional depth. Very much the same.
Very cool.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. A couple of questions here. Eric Rose, watching on YouTube, asks, would it be a KP9, since we could see the aurora a while back in Southwest Virginia?
If Yes, it would definitely be one of those higher numbers for sure. I think you could probably see an aurora in Virginia even at maybe KP8, but at KP9, aurora was recorded during a couple of those big storms we had last year and the prior year. They recorded aurora and saw it as far as Southern California,
Hmm.
Texas,
Florida.
Alabama. So
Yeah.
absolutely. And those were KP8, KP9, 9+ events.
Wow. Final question. This is Alan Dyer from watching on YouTube. And he says, this is for you, Bob. Did the displays in Norway match, or did they exceed anything you'd seen in Duluth area on a good night?
Oh, that's quite a good question, Alan. Um, th- I would say it was a different intense display, but I have seen equally intense displays in Duluth, particularly coronal auroras that have just pulsated and flashed for an hour. But the aurora in Norway was sort of larger looking to me, different forms. But no, I would say I've seen equal in Duluth, put it simply. Just different.
I
One.
have two memories of Northern Lights, and I live well in the Aurora Oval in southern Arizona at 31.9 degrees. And I've seen a number of displays from here. And of course, whenever the aurora is here, it's just wonderful to look at, almost as an old friend. But I remember two specific displays. My first one, July the 8th, 1966. I was at the Adirondack Science Camp, setting up my telescope, and I was comet hunting back then. But that was the night I forgot all about telescopes and comet hunting because the night sky just blazed with northern lights, and it really was a wonderful display. And the other one was here in Arizona when I was enjoying the display and pointing it out and noticing that Wendy and I noticed that the crowd that was left there from a star party started walking toward the north as if we were physically reaching out to the northern lights. And it was just wonderful to see, and wonderful lecture. Thank you, Bob.
Oh,
Um,
thank you,
I-
David.
I have to add that of this entire group, I'm probably the only one who ever got pulled over by an aurora. I think I've told Terry about this. I was driving in Indiana to give a talk one night in the winter, and I suddenly noticed that there were red lights all over my driver's side window, and I figured it was a fire truck or something like that, emergency vehicle of some kind. And I pulled over, and there were no vehicles. So I lowered the window, and it was still red. So it was quite a dramatic display that night to the north.
Well, that's something, Chuck, because red displays are fairly uncommon. But
Both of the major ones I've seen here in Louisville or near here have been just solid red in the north. Both
well,
of
that
them.
does make sense in a way too. If you live in the southern U.S., you will see more red displays than we do in the north. And the reason for that is that being south, you see just the uppermost part
part.
of the northern lights, which is the red part. Whereas if you go further north, you see the red and the green. And interestingly, in Norway, under the oval, when you looked up, it was primarily green. That was almost, I only saw one red ray the whole time, and that was more towards the southern, the end of the trip. And then there's that purple fringe that you get. But yeah, it was mostly green. And not that I know this is a fact, but I hypothesize, I've talked to some people about this. When you go farther north, looking from the bottom up, the red rays are up and hidden, sort of. So you don't actually see the rays. That's why you get more green. Whereas if you're where you're at, or me, with the horizontal broadside view, we do get to see more red rays. But yeah, that's a great story.
Okay.
All right. I have one question. Bob, you and I were talking about forecasting. Let's
Yeah.
say when you're home, what is it that you look? What gauge do you gauge what the aurora might be? Like, do you use the BZ? Do you use the KP? What, or the density? What do you look at first that will make you go outside to see if the aurora is there?
Well, I always get the free forecasts from NOAA. You can just sign up for that at the Space Weather Prediction Center. You get the free email, and it's always updated. So I'll check every one of those, especially in the evening, and I go, oh, okay, they're forecasting such and such a KP, so that alerts me early on. I should pay attention. But my main one that I use is the BZ, which is, as you saw in that one diagram, is the direction of the magnetic field that's coming in with that bundle of particles. And if that BZ is south, and on the graph, you can see if it's south. If it's south and it's deeply south, I know we're going to see the northern lights. That's my number one. And for those who aren't familiar with the BZ, it is a live graphic that you can find. It's called the real-time solar wind. Just type that into Google, real-time solar wind. And it's the data coming from the ACE and also the Discover satellites that are 1 million miles in front of the Earth, between us and the sun. So as the wind hits them, it hits them first, and they sense and measure the wind and send that data live to that website. So you're seeing the live data stream coming from the satellites. Then it takes another 50 minutes or so for that cloud of particles to actually make it to the Earth, wrap around the back, and then slingshot into the polar regions.
That's wild.
So it's great. That's what I use, Terry. It's mostly BZ. That's the surest thing for me, is just looking at the red squiggly line on that real-time solar wind graphic. How about you?
I'm like you. I always look at the KP, but I don't judge by the KP. I'll go to the BZ because one thing I always look at is negative. I want it to be down there as low. I also look at density. I look at a little bit of everything to
Yeah.
try to make the overall picture. But if I have any doubt, I just go outside and start looking
There you
just to
go.
make sure, and then watch everything come in.
Yeah, the
So
density of the solar wind makes a difference too. There's more particles.
everything
Also,
kind of, yeah,
that
there,
same
there,
page has all those graphics, and one of them is the speed of the solar wind. And if you see it suddenly peak up like this, so that's a good sign too.
yeah,
And then I'll go out and I'll look just like you. I've got a lot of trees here though, and so I can look down the road and I have a slot this wide of the northern sky, and I'll bring my camera out and photograph that slot. And if I
yeah,
get green in there,
yeah,
I'm good to go. Then I get in the
yeah.
car. You
And I
do.
think that's really great advice right there. If you have any doubt, point your camera, take a 10-second shot, and it's probably going to tell you if something's there.
Yeah,
Um,
if you see yellow, if you see orange, white, you're not seeing the northern lights. But if you see green, it really is a great sign that it might be worth your while to get out a little north of where you're at to where you can get a better view of the northern lights. And of course, finding a place, having your northern lights spot where you live is important. And I always suggest that people use light pollution map.info. There's a website that shows a detailed map of wherever you live, where the lights are really bad and where the sky is darker. And you can zoom in, it shows the road. So you can actually decide, hey, it's darker over here. Maybe I should check this out in the daytime, maybe find a spot and then go there at night, and see the northern lights. So it can be a useful tool, that light pollution info or light pollution map.
need to get a talk sometime and get Alan in on this one too about the SARS, about Steve, some of the odd things about the Aurora. So with that, if nobody else has any questions,
We always have questions.
Oh, that's
always
good.
have
That's
questions,
good.
it seems you answer one, it makes you think of another one.
That's right. That's right.
So,
But
all right,
it's a
Bob,
Friday night, and people want to get home and start their weekend, I think. But this was a great way to start the weekend. So thank you.
yes. Well,
Thank
and
you.
everybody, don't forget the eclipse. We've got a total lunar eclipse coming up.
Yep.
For me, it will be like from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. roughly on Friday morning, the 14th, I believe. It's Friday.
It's the 13th and the 14th. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
it's mostly a morning event for over here too, in the Midwest.
Yeah,
So
mostly
Right.
Eastern. Yeah. So
We'll be
everybody
out.
remember that, watch that. And thank
Yeah.
you, Bob, so much. We
thank you
appreciate
very
you
much for
being
having
here.
me. It was fun to
Hey,
be here.
you
Thanks.
are welcome anytime you want to come.
All
You can
right.
join us anytime.
All right. Thank you, Terry.
All right.
That's great.
And I will
Thanks.
say thank you to everybody here and thank you to all the viewers. We appreciate you being there. I will say because I'm going to be traveling a little bit and then I'm going to be heading to NEAF and Chuck Allen will be at NEAF and Lori Ansorge, I believe, will be at NEAF with us. We all three will be at NEAF. So that is the first weekend of April. If you go, please stop by, say hi. We'd love to talk to you. And thank you all for being here. And Scott, thank you for broadcasting it. And I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Well, I just wanted to again thank everyone for tuning in. It was great to have such wonderful guests watching live. If you are watching this in replay, there's lots of great information here, and you might be inspired to start saving up those dollars to make that trip to go see Aurora yourself. Definitely want to do that with, if it's your first time, do it with a group that is familiar with it, and you might check with Terry Mann before you go, because she can tell you you know, a lot of great tips and, you know, how to, not only on how to see that eclipse, or Aurora, but you know, where you can go, how you can do it safely, and how you can enjoy it to the maximum. So thank you so much. Thanks to the League, and you guys have a great night, and we'll see you later. Keep looking up.
Thanks, Scott.
Kuiper Belt objects,
Thank you,
also
Scott.
known as
Thank you.
KBOs, are icy remnants from the early solar system located beyond Neptune. There are over 3,000 cataloged KBOs so far, but scientists estimate there could be hundreds of thousands more, each over 10 miles in diameter. The largest KBO is the dwarf planet Pluto. While these distant objects typically don't form their own systems, researchers have likely identified a stable trio of icy space rocks in the Kuiper Belt. This discovery of the Aljira system, made using data from the Keck Observatory in Hawaii and NASA's Hubble Space Telescope, could mark only the second three-body system found in the region. If confirmed, the Aljira system hints at the possibility of more such triple systems awaiting discovery. These formations challenge the idea that collisions in the crowded Kuiper Belt produce such groups. Instead, they support the theory that triplets like these form directly through the gravitational collapse of material in the solar system's early disk, around 4.5 billion years ago. While stars are known to form as pairs or triples through gravitational collapse, researchers are still investigating whether this process applies to Kuiper Belt objects. The Aljira system lies 3.7 billion miles away, or 44 times the distance between Earth and the Sun. Only a fraction of a pixel on Hubble's camera separates the two innermost members. Studying such distant, faint objects orbiting so close together requires patience and persistence. Using Hubble and Keck, scientists observed the system with data spanning over 17 years. This long-term study shows us Hubble's incredible value to astronomy. After more than 30 years in space, Hubble can revisit objects days, weeks, months, or even decades later, helping us uncover the mysteries of the universe, one observation at a time.